Hello everyone, welcome back to Manatee Local. I know it's been a while, but life happens and we just got to get back in the saddle. So today's topic is the very controversial Senate Bill 180 passed by our very corrupt Florida legislature and signed by the very corrupt Governor Ron DeSantis. This bill purports to be an emergency management bill, but what it really is a Trojan horse to tie the hands of county and municipal officials at regulating their land use so that they will not be able to deny developers who want to have more freedom to destroy our environment. So here's a basic breakdown. After the major hurricanes that came through last year, the Senate bill passed this Emergency Management Act that does a few things. Now, I'm going to pull up Google Gemini so you can see generally what the contours of SB 180 are. Okay, so let's go here. So SB 180 has restrictions on local land use regulations. This is the most contentious part of this bill. That prohibits local governments from adopting new land use regulations that are considered more restrictive or burdensome than existing rules. More restrictive or burdensome. What does that mean, really? Let's think about that. Anyway, the prohibition applies to any county and its municipalities that has been included in a federal disaster declaration or that is located within 100 miles of a hurricane's track. That's like basically all of the counties, with very few exceptions, if there are any. The provision is retroactive to August 1st of last year and is set to expire on October 1st, 2027. So that gives the real estate developers a little more time to screw around and ram through a few more projects, right? This has led to concerns that it will hinder local efforts to implement stronger environmental protections, flood mitigation measures, and other resilience planning. People that don't understand this are not paying attention and are most likely Ron DeSantis cheerleaders who refuse to understand anything that might be negative about their little god. Anyway, so here we go. Emergency management and transparency. The bill mandates that state and local governments enhance their emergency management protocols. Okay, I'm just going to kind of read the first sentence here of the next of these following paragraphs. Homeowner and tenant protections. SB 180 includes provisions aimed at protecting homeowners and tenants, preventing local governments from assessing impact fees on replacement structures that do not increase the demand on public facilities, and provides for automatic extensions for existing permits and development orders during a state of emergency. Okay, so there's some stuff there, changes to some flood regulations and special needs shelters. So there are good things in the bill. But there are also, unfortunately, some very bad things in the bill that are basically a Trojan horse for tying our hands and making us do the developer's bidding. Now, here in Manatee County, we've had a little bit of a history here in that a very corrupt Board of County Commissioners rolled back our wetland protections from 50 feet to 25 feet, which is the state standard. But, of course, there are there is the ability to get waivers from that from Southwest Florida Water Management, or SWIFMUD, as it's called. And wouldn't you know, as soon as these protections were rolled back, one of the big donor developers here, the owner of Medallion Homes, Carlos Roof, managed to apply, and wow, because he's very influential and connected at the state, got an exception for Aqua by the Bay, which is not too far from me, for like 0 wetland protections. I don't know what's wrong with this man. Is he a doofus that does not understand the value of mangroves? Apparently. There's a cartoon out there that shows a guy chopping down mangroves in front of a house and then the water flooding the house. Well, that actually happened to a development near me, a very wealthy development, and those folks, they got washed out in, I think it was Helene, the second storm. It came and did massive damage, wiping them out. While we over here in our neighborhood, well, we had thick mangroves that were much higher and much thicker. And guess what? We didn't flood. You'd think people would learn, but, Upton Sinclair has a saying, and I'm going to paraphrase it. A man will not understand something if his salary depends on his not understanding it. And that's what we have going on here with most of these bootlickers for these corrupt politicians. Now, again, remember, this is a nonpartisan site. I hate both parties, actually. But, the people involved here are primarily Republicans, but there are a whole bunch of Democrats involved too, because Senate Bill 80 passed pretty easily. And I don't know what's wrong with you people. What is wrong with you people? Well, anyway, the real problem is that we don't pay attention to local politics. People have started waking up to paying attention to the county commission, but the state legislature gets away with murder. They're the invisible hand here. They're the ones that made Senate Bill 180 possible. That's looking at you, Jim Boyd. It's looking at you, Will Robinson. That's looking at you there, Bill Connerly. This is so frustrating. After all the work we did to identify developer cronies last year for the primary, Bill Connerly still slipped through because we had too many people in the primary for House District 72. One of them should have dropped out. But I'm not going to go into that race, but this is crazy. But yeah, the developer crony who was obviously paid for with the same kinds of garbage advertising that we recognized for our county commission, using Trump as, the sword and shield, it shouldn't work. It shouldn't work anymore in this day and age. And people have got to stop voting with the lizard brain. It's not your tribe. Your tribe is full of corrupt politicians. Yes, both of you. Okay, both of you. Your tribe is full of corrupt politicians. But at the local level, it's a little bit different. You can get better people who are Republicans, and you can get better people who are Democrats at the local level, people who will take care of your community. So this is just garbage. People have to evaluate candidates on the merits of policy. Policy, more than anything, should matter. Even a broken clock will be right twice a day. There are politicians out there that I normally would not agree with, but they're right on some issues, and I can only give them credit when the credit is due because I'm a fair and reasonable person. But we can't keep voting for people just because they're Republican. You can't just hate Democrats more than you need home rule. You can't hate Democrats more than you want to protect your wetlands. We fortunately have some good Republicans here that do want to protect our wetlands. So we got better Republicans, but not Bill Connerly, not Will Robinson, and not Jim Boyd. These people are self-interested rich folks that are protecting their interests because they are paid by these developers. Okay? And these developers don't give a damn. They're not the final owner of the land. They're just middlemen. They develop the property and they pass off all kinds of costs to us, and then they go away. And when the flood comes, oops, too bad, so sad. You got to take care of it because it's your property, it's your home. Oops, too bad, so sad. You got all this traffic now. Oops, too bad, so sad. Oh, the streets are flooding so much more now. We've got to do more work to clean out the ditches and culverts because of all the runoff that won't be absorbed by the trees that used to be there. Now I know that there are some people that are saying, oh, you're part of the problem. You moved to Florida. My family's been here for like 30 years. We're not the immediate part of the problem, but yeah, people moving here is part of the problem. We have to think about how to handle that in a way that is sensible and protects our environment. Nobody's entitled to anything, so nobody's entitled to live here, and screw up our traffic even more. I thought it was so funny. At a town hall I saw a while back, several months ago, this person who just moved here about a year or so ago had the audacity to complain to the county commissioner about the traffic where she lived. I mean, really? You didn't know that when you visited here? What the traffic's like? And then you want to complain? Look, there are limits to everything. There's no such thing as unlimited growth. Just because the earth is big and the resources are vast doesn't mean that it's not unlimited. There are limits to how much we can develop. There are limits to how much we can develop for a reasonable price. And those are two different things. Again, clean water, right? Clean water should be the measurement of where you stop. How much capacity do you have to deliver clean water at an affordable rate? When the time comes that we have to hook up to the Peace River, that's not going to be a cheap bill. That's going to be, what, $600 million, something like that? $1 billion probably by the time? Who wants to pony up the taxes to pay for $1 billion hookup to the Peace River? Everyone's going to whine and complain the same way they are whining and complaining about the utilities and the new big bins of the garbage. One, they weren't paying attention. Two, they didn't do anything to stop anybody from taking the action. And so they get what they get. We have to stop people who are going to vote for too much development. We need to have control over our development process. And the corrupt people in Tallahassee are not the ones that we want doing it. Now, there's a bit of controversy here over our commissioners delaying the vote on the bill to restore the wetlands protections. There are some people who said that we should have done it because it's the right thing, and I'm not going to disagree. It was the right thing. However, there are problems with it, and I'm going to talk about that too. So just give me a sec here. I also asked Gemini a question here that I'm going to talk about in a second. So if our county commissioners had gone ahead and passed this law, it would have been immediately contradictory to the state law. Granted, there are a couple of things that would have been achieved here. One, we would have made the principals stand. Two, we would have ensured standing to sue, if in the case of retaliation from the state. But the other thing that it would have done is given a legal basis for Ron DeSantis to remove every single county commissioner that voted for that ordinance. Now, think about this. We just went through so much time and money to beat all the developer cronies in the August primary and get decent Republicans in office. Who would Ron DeSantis put on that board? Kevin Van Ostenbridge, Ray Turner, James Satcher, and April Culbreth. The four people that we did not want would be put on that board. Why am I saying this? Because Ron DeSantis had the audacity to put Karen Rose back on the school board in Sarasota to fill a vacant position, even though she lost in the Republican primary, and people told her, no, we don't want her. Well, guess what? Ron DeSantis gives Sarasota the middle finger. We would get that in quadruple. Now, there are some people who are saying, oh, this is the counsel of your fears to be afraid. Guess what? There are more consequences than just losing your job and us getting the same crappy commissioners, although that alone should be the reason to stop, okay? There are consequences here, and I'm going to go to that. So I asked Google a couple of things here. I asked, what are the potential punishments for a county commissioner or other municipal official in Florida that votes for ordinances that contradict state law? And I'm going to scooch it here. So here's the answer. There's a legal principle known as Dillon's Rule that holds that municipal and county governments are creatures of the state and can only exercise powers expressly granted to them by the state legislature or the Constitution. And when ordinances conflict with the state law takes precedence. That's very common, as like the supremacy clause in the United States Constitution, similar to that. However, here are some of the other consequences here. So while they might not exactly face direct criminal charges for voting for an ordinance, there are some potential consequences. Invalidation of the ordinance. A court can declare the ordinance null and void. This is the most common. Removal from office. The governor has the authority to suspend an elected or appointed official for malfeasance, misfeasance, neglect of duty, habitual drunkenness, incompetence, or permanent inability to perform official duties. And if you're convicted of a felony or misdemeanor, they can remove you, okay? Now, felony charges for official misconduct. If the vote for a conflicting ordinance is part of a broader scheme to knowingly and intentionally obtain a benefit for someone or cause unlawful harm to another, they could be charged with a third-degree felony for official misconduct. This is a more severe punishment and would require proving a corrupt intent beyond the simple vote on an ordinance. There's also civil and legal liability. The official could be exposed to civil lawsuits if their actions lead to harm, or financial loss for the individuals or the county. Don't forget the ethics committee as well. All right. We've already seen that Kevin Van Ostenbridge was petty enough to file ethics complaints against people. Do you think that wouldn't happen here? And who's going to foot the bill for these ethics these ethics complaints. So either we as taxpayers foot the bill, or we force these individuals who did the right thing to foot the bill. And you know, we have seen from what happened to Joe McClash that they're going to run up legal fees, which are going to end up probably bankrupting people for these bills. Now, is this worth it? Is this what we demand of our local representatives? Some people would say yes. I squarely disagree with that. I believe it's completely unfair to subject our local politicians that we worked hard to put in there to do that, only to get Kevin Van Ossenbridge, James Satcher, Ray Turner, and April Culbreth back in office to undo every single thing that we have achieved in the last 8 months. That's unacceptable to me. That math is not mathing. You know, I think to think that those consequences wouldn't happen requires a leap of faith in the integrity of the people that we're working with here. You know, DeSantis and the ethics people and the legislature. We have no evidence to support that faith. Okay, I mean, DeSantis has no more political risk. He himself is not going to be running for office. He's termed out. Okay, but DeSantis is still very influential in this state, and DeSantis controls the Republican Party. And what did the Republican Party do very recently here in Florida, the Republican Party of Florida? The Republican Party of Florida completely erased our elected officials in the Republican Executive Committee and the state committee man, Trent Wayman, and the state committee woman, Jackie Heist, and all of the precinct officials that were elected, and put in their own people. People who a majority, nobody wanted. Nobody wanted you, Alice. Nobody wanted you. And nobody sure as hell wanted whatever, Top Lobster guy. What's his face? The little creep. Nobody wanted him. Okay? But this little stooge, the little PR stooge, was put in as a state committee man. I forgot his name, you know, but everybody knows who I'm talking about. Nobody wanted you. But why do we have you in a position? Because we're dealing with corrupt individuals who only care about power. Okay, power is what matters here. I'm reminded of the scene from Game of Thrones season 1 when Ned Stark finally faces off against Joffrey. You know, he comes in, he thinks he has the city guard, he has Littlefinger and the city guard, right? He comes in with King Robert's will, and Cersei's like, "Let me see the will," right? And then she reads it out loud and rips it up. Why? Because it's a piece of paper. You know, a piece of paper isn't going to protect you from power when it's held by unscrupulous people. Okay? So these pieces of paper of being right about the law and doing it will not protect our people. It will be a Pyrrhic victory at best. I was told that the vote that we just did to actually join the lawsuit was a symbolic thing because it's going to take so long to resolve. Yes, it is. It's symbolic, but it's not symbolic, you know, because it will actually gain clarification on the law. Now, if the legislature actually revises the law and excises the controversial portions or clarifies it, then the lawsuit will be moot. And what will it have cost us? A few $1,000s. It's $10,000 to join the case right now, and of course, you're going to share legal fees after. But that's more important to clarify the language of that law because it is constitutionally deficient in a number of ways. It's unconstitutionally vague, and it has too many different subjects involved. So that's a couple of the bases for challenging the law. But you know, that's how the county commissioners are legally allowed to challenge law without contradicting the law and having to self-immolate for grandstanding, what amounts to political grandstanding. The real symbolic move would have been voting for that wetland ordinance, which would have been immediately declared invalid and put all of our people that we work so hard to put in there at risk. I don't know. No, don't be a hero like that. I don't want anybody to be a hero like that. It's dumb heroism. I want smart heroism. So let's do the smart heroism and keep on track with the lawsuit. Okay? That's really the only legal avenue that's available. So hang on. Okay, I'm back. So I have a document here that I got when I asked Google about a county commission's ability to challenge a statute. So I'll go back to my screen share here. So when I went to Google Gemini, I asked, what a county commission could do to challenge a potentially unconstitutionally vague state statute. This was the grounds that I chose because I think that it's clearest here that the statute is vague, and could lead to some kind of arbitrary enforcement, okay, which would mean enforcement in favor of the developers, but not anybody else. But anyway, let's see here. So it gives a good summary here, but basically the state, the county and municipalities have the right to challenge a law. So what they have to do is determine that they have standing. There needs to be a determination that they have standing, that there's an injury in fact, but it's not traditional like monetary damage or property damage that's addressed by monetary awards, but there are some harms here in terms of the ability of our county commissions to actually do their jobs and protect our environment and protect our areas. So there is a declaratory judgment action, which is provided in Florida Statute Chapter 86. Is the most appropriate procedural mechanism. I'm going to go right here. So, allowing for a proactive judicial determination of rights and the constitutionality of the state statute without requiring a prior violation or enforcement action. That is what this lawsuit that we are supporting and have recently joined is all about. So by joining the lawsuit, we are invoking the right underneath the Florida statutes to challenge the law and get clarification of that language. So by joining this lawsuit, we are following the proper legal means under the law to challenge this law, which may be and probably is unconstitutionally vague and other reasons. Okay, so that's what's got to get done. That's what we're doing. It's not symbolic. It's actually important that this language be clarified. It's not important, or rather not advisable, or even desirable for our folks to throw themselves on their sword, subject themselves to civil and criminal liability for this. Some people think that's what leadership is. No. Leadership needs to be smart. Okay. Yes, it needs to be principled, but it also needs to be smart. It's not pragmatic in the least. We'll lose everything for what? No. We're doing it the right way, and that's what's more important. Yes, that is slow. I actually hope that the legislature will moot the lawsuit. Make it moot, okay? The lawsuit will go away on its own when the legislature changes the language, if and when that happens. If it doesn't, then we're going to go and challenge it. How long will it take? I don't know. But the point is that formal challenge needs to happen regardless. And it should not require our folks self-immolating to do it. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on the subject. I'll be back. I'll talk about some more stuff. I'll figure out my schedule and get more into the content that we have been doing. Stuff has changed, and I have to figure out how much I want to get out. And if other people would help me out by recording stuff, that would be great. But, most people are not doing that. They're not comfortable doing it. Anyway, thanks. And if you have any comments, questions, please leave them. I'll be happy to post the documents that I've gotten from Google so that people can just get a brief overview of the legal situation. It's not very long, and it's easy to understand. And I think it'll be helpful for people to understand why we have to do it, why we have to respond the way we're responding right now. And that's it. Thanks, and have a great day.